Metagame is hot and spicy, and so are those takes. Let's take a look at some of the hottest takes in Marvel Snap. Don't know if you're asking about the game in general or Arishem, but the Spotlight system is absolute trash, and I cannot believe it has been 9 months and nothing has changed about it. I spend close to no money on the game at this point, and it has become impossible to get any weekly new card. Duplicate protection just doesn't exist, and the payout of 1,000 tokens for a duplicate while there's 8 cards I don't have is actually insane. It would take me 6-ish weeks to get enough tokens to even buy a new card, and I can't get tokens for weekend missions because I don't have the effing card. Not really a hot take, more of a rant that I didn't want to post directly to my page. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Well, first things first, these whole video, like every video I do like this, is actually secretly just a rant that I didn't want to take full credit for. So I totally understand where you're coming from on that one. In terms of the economy, I think that Spotlight caches have been a failure on nearly every axis, which is to say they have been too, like, at the same time, and I realize people might jump on me for this, they're too generous to people who have nothing while also still feeling terrible to those same people. So if you engage fully in the Spotlight system, it is better value than the previous system. However, it ends up in a situation where you don't feel like you're getting better value, right? It doesn't matter what the numbers say. If when you engage with the system, it just feels like you're getting screwed. And the way you optimize for it is sort of odd, right? Like you optimize by like, okay, you wait for a good week where you're missing multiple cards. That's when you open your things, you budget, you plan, you save. And that's not fun for anyone. That's not a fun system to engage in. I shouldn't have to, in order to find the right way to get cards in a game, look up a guide on future data mines and plan out stuff in a spreadsheet. That seems a little bit ridiculous. And I think people like to blame the players who like just roll 1 or 2 keys on a given week. But if the developers didn't want that to be possible, they could have made it not possible. Some of this system is predicated on the assumption that players will make bad decisions and those bad decisions benefit the developers monetarily. So you have a system that feels terrible, is more generous than the previous system, and doesn't get any of the like benefits of being more generous than the previous system, right? Like the fact that it's more generous than the previous system, and I genuinely believe that, especially when you like just enter pool 3 and you're suddenly getting, for the price of what would have been in the old system, like 1 series 5 card, you are getting like 4 series 4 and 5 cards. Like for those people, it's an extremely beneficial thing. The fact that that exists is good, but the fact that they managed to make it suck for everyone else is not. And that you add that on to like the compounding bit of like, okay, not only is all of that true, but also you are now fully dependent on what cards they decide to let go in the cache. So if you miss anything, you have to wait 3 months. Yeah, on the whole, I would say Spotlight system has been a failure, is currently being held together by duct tape, and I would like them to do something else. My real fear, though, is like they rework it to something that feels better, but maybe like isn't mathematically better. And then all the people who are mad at this one being mathematically better but feeling worse will be mad at the next one for feeling better but not being mathematically better. And I do wonder about that. That is a fear I have. Like when I think of like things that I'm worried, in as much as I get worried about this, which is pretty rare, things that I'm worried could kill the game, like a bad economy rework, I think could do that. So it is something that enters my mind. I do think that if they want to change this system, they need to be very careful and very cautious with it. Darkhawk has been and still is bad for the game. It encourages a style of play which isn't interesting or engaging every time it becomes popular, i.e. not just when Arishem or Thanos are good. So I'm going to read into this one a bit and say that what they're talking about here is rocks. They don't like when rocks are a popular thing. I actually think that rocks are a pretty interesting dynamic in the context of Snap specifically, because they're disruption that you don't know if it's actually happened or not. And what I mean by that is rocks are unique. Decks with Darkhawk in it are uniquely positioned to make a mathematical call and say, it is correct for me to cope stay here. I think that's very interesting. There's a lot of situations where it's like, okay, I lose to this specific thing, but mathematically they probably don't have that thing, so I'm going to stay here. And then you have to start thinking about, okay, well, why would they be staying in this game if they didn't have that thing? How afraid of that do I have to be? What percentage of my deck is rolled up in the equity of getting to stay in situations like this? I think that the way rocks as a disruption tool interact with the snap system, the stakes doubling on the final turn, is actually very interesting. So I do disagree with this take. I think that they do provide a unique and intriguing method of disruption because you do not know what is happening. I believe the best deck in each week is often not found, as the pressure of format needs to produce something like that is tournaments, so I think the metagame is often undersolved, which is a positive, not a negative. There are two things here. First of all, premise absolutely correct. I do think that very often the metagame is simply not solved, and it is very easy for someone to look at the metagame and say, oh, I know how to handle this. And so when I do my tier lists, I think of them as scouting reports for someone who is sufficiently prepared. They can look at my tier list and say, I need to beat this. This is what it does. This is how it's good. I need to beat this. This is what it does. This is how it's good. And then use that to attack the metagame. That is sort of what in an ideal world, that's what I want my tier list being used for. In the real world, people net deck them. But that's fine, right? Like, and so we have a situation in a game like Marvel Snap where a metagame moves very fast, etc., etc. I do want to double in on this tournament thing, because I know Mason's a Magic player. Tournaments in Marvel Snap and tournaments in Magic, they're just not really the same thing. I do believe that if there were like tournaments in Magic, the shorthand is they're the monetary incentive to compete, right? In Snap, they never really have been. They're like usually free entry, minimal prizing type things. And so they didn't have the same pull to that a tournament in Magic, which can be like very large amounts of money. Like there are people who make their living off of that or have bought a house based on that. Like it's a thing, right? The incentives are different in those situations. So yes, general agreement with this take. It is very hard for metagames to be solved. It bothers me a lot when people assume that because I do a meta report, I think I know everything. I obviously don't. I feel like that's obvious, at least. I'm very dumb. The ability for a metagame to be truly solved is, I think, something that is very much overstated. And I think this also ties back into like balance conversations, because when we look at the metagame we have and then we're like, that's it, that's the platonic perfect solved metagame, they need to balance for this. It's like, well, how were they supposed to know that's the configuration it would end up at, right? I do think that, on the whole, I agree with this take. It is a correct thing. I think it would be absurd to suggest that Marvel Snap metagames end up solved when they moved as fast as they do. They move so fast. They have no time to breathe at all. The solve is at best rough. Weekly card releases being used as the main tactic for boosting engagement makes it incredibly challenging for a competitive scene to exist in the game. There will never be a meta, only a series of rapidly changing pocket metas. There is something to this, but I think it's far down the list of why it's hard for a competitive scene to exist in a game like Marvel Snap. I think the number one reason why a competitive scene doesn't exist in a game like Marvel Snap in the way that it would exist in something like Terra or Magic is that those are games that put an emphasis on the competitive aspect of their game. They had the company making the game sponsoring that. They had a different environment for venture capital investments in esports, a zero interest rate environment. They had various different things. But I think also, when you zoom out a little bit, I cannot think of a card game that's esports program can be described as a success. I just can't. So when you look at it, what happened to Hearthstone Grandmasters, I mean, Lambie's playing this game now, right? Lambie's playing this game, he's playing Parallel. That's a former Hearthstone Grandmaster, right? What happened to the Magic Pro League? It doesn't exist anymore. What happened to Runeterra full stop, right? Like, there is not a lot of evidence that card game esports is something that people should be investing in, especially something that a company should be investing in, especially a company that isn't hooked up to a larger money hose, right? Like Team 5, Hearthstone, that's hooked up to Blizzard. When Hearthstone esports moved to YouTube, a move that many people argue was very bad for Hearthstone esports, That was as a part of a package deal with other Blizzard properties. Runeterra is hooked up to the Riot money hose. As far as I know, they never actually made more money than they spent. I don't know that for sure, but I believe I heard something about that. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, but I don't believe them to be an incredibly profitable venture, right? Magic the Gathering actually is extremely profitable, but Magic, like, it is profitable, but I don't know that pro Magic is profitable, if that makes sense. I think it probably is if you look at, like, the knock-on effects of it, the infrastructure it's created within the scene. But I think, on average, if you looked at the expense required to host, say, a Grand Prix, you're probably not making money on that. You look at the expense required to host a Pro Tour, they're probably not making money on that. Like, it's hard, right? It's a very hard thing to do, and that's with paper card games and an infrastructure that is set up so that, like, okay, what is the purpose of Magic content? To tell you about this card that you then buy on the site that you're reading about. Like, there's a much clearer product integration there, whereas in Marvel Snap, the product integration is not nearly as clear or as useful or as helpful or anything like that. So when I look at why there isn't a Marvel Snap esports scene, it's because it's probably not going to make money. Anyone using Arishem's popularity to suggest that draft mode will be popular doesn't understand the idea of draft at all. The gameplay experience wouldn't even be able to be remotely similar without the bonus energy and being able to guarantee half your deck's cards are actually good. Yeah, I agree that anyone saying Arishem proves people would like draft mode is like that is pretty ridiculous. But I think they're more speaking to saying, man, it's actually been very fun playing these underplayed cards, right? I think it's more about like people who just don't like playing meta, able to be like, yo, I won with Cyclops or whatever, right? Like, there is some fun in that. I think on the whole, yes, I agree. Draft mode and Arishem are not even remotely similar, just completely different experiences, not even close to the same thing. But the people that want draft mode, and this is a thing that I think a lot of people don't really get about why people want draft mode, what they want is not just something different, but something cheaper. And Arishem manages to be the best value purchase in the game and be different. So it's not exactly, when you look at like the differences between like draft mode and Arishem, they're very clear. Draft mode is like a skill testing format wherein the card selection is a major part of the process you're creating. You obviously don't get +1 energy. It's a very different thing. But what they're speaking to are the reasons people want draft mode, which are often different from how the game is actually played out. And I think one of the main reasons people want draft mode is because they want to play cards they otherwise wouldn't get a chance to play. And one of the other main reasons people want draft mode is because they want to spend less money. Over the last few months, the game has been getting power crept slowly but surely. There are no new bad cards anymore. Every new card is either a good generic value card, like Nocturne or Red Guardian, big stat sticks like Sage and Red Hulk, or key combo pieces. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, I think that is, I don't know how they would be able to have a system like they do if they didn't do that, right? When I look at game dev, I think that there are usually two solutions to how do we release new cards that people get excited about. Solution number one is power creep them. Solution number two is rotation. And I'm not sure Marvel Snap is able to handle solution number two, so it makes sense to me that they're doing solution number one. When you say like there are no new bad cards anymore, like, yeah, that's probably like yeah, good. Like, there shouldn't be. You're like, the only solution to what you're saying that is not one of the two solutions I've lined up is make bad stuff and then charge people 6,000 tokens and put it in spotlight caches. That's not a real solution. Make bad stuff is not a real solution. Second point, Hydra Bob exists. Everyone thinks he's gonna suck. What if he sucks? What if he's like the new martyr, you know? Then they've made a bad card. Was everyone gonna be happy with that? I feel a lot more people are mad that Hydra Bob might suck than they are mad that like the cards they are getting with their hard-earned money are good. OTAs in Infinity Week or the last week of the season suck. You could theoretically have had a tough grind for 3 to 4 weeks, and then when it really matters, the meta shifts on you completely. Yeah, I buy this, actually. I think that probably does suck. Yeah. No, because that's like the time when people are really trying to achieve their seasonal goals, whether those be in Conquest or for most people on the ladder. Having a card like Arishem drop, having a major OTA, having just big metagame shifts on the last week of the season, I do buy that that is frustrating. I'm not sure that they should do anything about it, right? Like, I don't think they need to be like, well, we think Arishem is going to be really good, so we can't release it on the last week. I don't think they should do stuff like that because A, very likely to be wrong, B, just not really a reliable thing to do, and C, sometimes they're going to have to make a card that's good and it's going to have to come out on the last week. You don't want to just be like, yeah, bad card last week every time, right? That seems like a bad idea. So mostly my thought process on this is I understand the frustration, but I don't know what a possible solve would be for this that wouldn't be deeply awkward. Like, maybe they could do, because, like, I feel like the only time you'd say is acceptable by this heuristic is, like, week 2, week 3, right? Because week 1, you're like, oh, man, I'm climbing. Week 4, you're like, oh, man, I'm trying to hit my goals. So the only possible time they could do this is week 2, week 3, and their schedule for OTAs is more intense than that. So I don't think there's actually a solve for this. There's sometimes going to be metagame shakeups on week 1 and week 4, unfortunately. Content creators should have a PSA regarding the benefits of one-round games in Proving Grounds. Everyone gets more tickets in the long run, conceding after the first loss, but I swear I'm seeing more people staying in. This is why I hate it when people are like, content creators need to do something, or content creators are doing this thing. I want this person to know, not only did I make a YouTube short about this, I also made a full video about this. I am content creators, and I have done the thing you asked, and it did not help. It did not help at all. People just got mad at me. They were like, oh, you can't tell us what to do. If I want to test in the Proving Grounds, I'll test in the Proving Grounds, whether or not that actually makes mathematical sense. No, the argument for me for snapping on turn 1 in the Proving Grounds is basically like, these tickets are artificial barriers set up by Second Dinner. If you complain about the cost of the game and you don't turn 1 snap in the Proving Grounds, you are part of the problem. We should all band together, revolution style, and try to rob them of as much of a profit margin as you possibly can get. I feel like that's a pretty good sell. The whole reason that those tickets even exist is so that they can justify charging actual gold, which is an actual currency, for entry into Conquest. The more we can lower that barrier of entry, the less anyone actually has to spend on the game. There's free rewards in Conquest. It seems very straightforward to me. I have done this PSA tons of times. I think you're overestimating the impact of content creators here. Or at least me. Untapped PC overlays should be banned. It gives unfair advantage. I even saw one of the biggest streamer checking the opponent deck. What could they have to beat him? So, for the record, I looked into this. I don't think it's true. Like, as far as I know, the Untapped overlay cannot tell you what is exactly in your opponent's deck. But what it does do, and I didn't know this because I never do this, is you can, like, click it and it'll be like, here are all the decks that have the cards your opponent has played, and here are the possibilities. So, a couple things going on here. If you could actually click it and see, as far as I know you can't, but if you could, click it and see what your opponent was actually guaranteed to be playing, that would be nuts. That would be crazy. That would be bannable. I don't think you can do that. I think what it does is it just says, okay, here are like the 9 cards you've seen. Here's the most popular deck with those 9 cards. This is what they're probably playing, which is probably a little bit borderline. Like I said, I've never done it because I just don't really have the... I stream on a laptop, right? So in order for me to do that, I would have to like tab out and like go to like my web browser and do all of that stuff. And I don't really have the time. Like I can't really do that. I stream on a laptop with my phone as chat. That's my stream setup. So it's like, I guess maybe there are other people who are better set up to use that than me, but also I kind of already know all that. Like if you're playing a deck that is on Untapped, I know what's in your deck. Like I know what people play in decks. That's kind of my job, right? So to me, I don't even really see that as an advantage. Like if you're playing a tech piece that is not in the most popular version of the deck, Well, yeah, then you got me, right? The same way you'd get anyone who was just looking that stuff up on Untapped. I already know all that stuff, right? Like I don't really know. I can see how that would be inappropriate, right? But also, if I'm streaming, everyone knows my deck, right? That's real. Like I play against a lot of people who know my deck. It devalues the ability of me to have a surprise card in there. I don't know. It's just one of those things that like I think is probably not bannable. It would be if you could do the thing you're saying it does, but as far as I know, you can't do that. If anyone has any proof that like you can actually guaranteed see your opponent's exact deck, I mean, let me know, because that would be bad, but I'm pretty sure you can't do that. Is it bad luck on my side that I always need 4 spotlight keys on hyped cards like Arishem, or SD has some knobs to turn? It's rigged against you specifically. Because you left this comment, your next one will take 4 keys unless you forward this video to 4 of your friends and then have them forward it to 4 of their friends. That is the only way to save you from bad luck. You must retweet this video with "Save me, Mr. Skeletal." No, yeah, it's random. You're gambling. Like, you are gambling. That is what that is. You have 4 25% chances. It's sometimes you don't get it till the last one. Wait, it's not 44 25%ers, right? It's like a 25%er, then a 33%er, then a 50%er, and then you're guaranteed, right? But yeah, it's as far as I know, and like I don't know why they'd lie about this. I mean, I guess I do know why they'd lie about this, because like it would be deeply unethical and immoral if they were actually doing it, and you'd lie about it because you don't want to be caught doing something deeply unethical and immoral. But I don't really think they are. I think if you think that they're manipulating the probabilities behind the scenes, your best bet is to not play a game made by scumbags who would do that, right? And I don't really think they're scumbags who would do that. But if you think they're scumbags who would do that, I would never buy any of their products. You know what I mean? We only play Marvel Snap because Lorcana, Flesh and Blood, One Piece TCG, and Star Wars TCG don't have a digital client. It fills the empty void of CCG because there is no better. No, I don't think that's true. I think, like, I know this sounds ridiculous. I play Marvel Snap because it's better than those games. I do. Like, whenever I go back and play a non-simultaneous turn game or a game without the ability to snap, I'm like, wow, this sucks. This actually sucks. What the hell? This is ridiculous. You're telling me I have to sit here and wait while they do stuff? Who does that in 2024? It's insane. For the record, though, I mean, like, Flesh and Blood has an unofficial one. Lorcana's unofficial one just got shut down. I think One Piece has an unofficial one. I don't know about the last one, but I do think that, like, generally speaking, I would describe Marvel Snap as a better card game, in as much as it is a card game. If you want to argue it's not a card game, understandable, than those games, personally. They should nerf Darkhawk and Loki to make Arishem less easily counterable. I'm assuming this is a joke, so I'm going to treat it like it's a joke and laugh. Haha, good one. The Snap community overreacts to everything. If a strong card is fun for people to play, whining for it to be nerfed 3 days after release is the most terminally online thing you could do. At the end of the day, it's a fun card game, and it's never really that deep. I do think the Snap community has a tendency to jump to, we should nerf this, or complaining in the worst possible way faster than it should. I think a lot of this is because people want to be the first one on the island, so to speak, where it's like, you know, if it turns out the card ends up being nerfable, they want to be like, I said that a week ago! Suck it, content creator! I think there's some of that happening, right? I get a lot of comments to that effect, where it's like, finally, KM, you're caught up to my big brain genius! And it's like, okay, sure, whatever. I think that there is a lot of that in Snap, where it's like people want to find the next thing everyone's going to be mad about and then be mad about it first, so that they can say they were mad about it first. I don't really get it, but it does seem like it happens a lot. As far as something like Arishem, though, like, I think that there is a degree to which you can say, you know, I'm worried about this, I think it might have to potentially get nerfed, and, like, be correct. But one of the things that really bothered me is, like, 2 or 3 days after it was released, I saw a bunch of people saying, I don't even know how they're gonna nerf this. And I want you to imagine that with, like, the capitalized, half not capitalized text. Because I feel like it's very easy to understand how you're gonna nerf Arishem. I could list 5 different ways just off the top of my head. Get rid of the blob mystique interaction. Make him start in your hand. Make him generate 15 cards. Make him generate 18 cards. Reduce the power of the random cards he generates. I don't know. There's a bunch of different things you can do. Like, there's a million different things you can do with that card. Like, it's a very easy card to nerf because there's a lot of different levers on it. And so, like, the base assumption of A, he has to be nerfed, which probably ends up being true, but is still very annoying to see 2 days into the card being released. And B, it's impossible to do it, which is definitely not true. Like, it's actually extremely easy to nerf that card, I think. And so you end up in a spot where it's like, because people want to jump on that island early, they talk with more surety about things than they probably should. And I get it, right? Because one of the things that I've had to work on as a content creator is putting a little more ambiguity in my sentences, because when I was younger, I struggled with always qualifying what I said. I was always, this is just my perspective. Here's what I think. It sort of diminishes your ability to express yourself when you correctly, for the record, identify that it is just one perspective out of many, that as humans, we are all extremely fallible. What I learned was, if you don't advocate for your beliefs, no one else is going to do it. And so if you spend all your time qualifying things, you're going to end up feeling like you get run over some of the time. So I understand the urge to just, like, start at a strong point rhetorically and then dial it back. I get it. But at the same time, it is sort of very frustrating to deal with, because that strong point rhetorically, when given to me in a context like that, is just like, what? Why are we there already? As an example, one of the things I get is like, KM, what are you going to do when Snap dies? People ask me that question. And it's like, you're making a lot of baseline assumptions here, none of which you know to be true. And it's just a very, like, strong point to start from for someone trying to have a conversation. And again, I get it. You don't want to start from, like, qualifying it or a point of weakness. I understand that. But it does feel like the Snap community has maybe a little bit too much of the not ever saying, this is just my opinion, or this is how I think, or I think this, or I would like to see this, as opposed to just like, this is how it is. Here's the problem. It's impossible to, like, there is a lot of just, like, forceful stuff out there. And I am aware of this in my own content, and I do sort of try to moderate it as best I can, but I'm probably not as good at it as I should be if I want to lecture other people on it, Arishem's high popularity isn't because he's broken, but because the card was way too interesting to pass, and the acquisition system funneled the majority of players into saving all their resources for him, so now everyone is playing him all at once. Yes, but it's also very possible he's broken because people don't play stuff that they lose with. Like, you pick up Arishem, you have a 40% win rate, you put it down. You pick up Arishem, you keep winning, you keep playing him, right? Like that, like, while I agree, it started at a much higher point than other cards ever will because he's so cool and unique. The fact that he's been able to sustain that is actually indicative that he is quite strong, right? Like, and I do think that right now, I would, if I were second dinner, consider nerfing him, or consider, front-loading Cassandra Nova or something like that, right? Like, do something about that, right? I remember feeling like this when Loki was released and saying they should front load Mobius to have us have the ability to deal with that, right? Like, I remember feeling like that. I do think that people sort of treat Marvel Snap like another card game, and I think that's bad. Like, they treat this stuff like, Magic banning a card, or Flesh and Blood putting a hero into Living Legend or whatever, where it's permanent. Like, it's almost impossible, and I really mean this. I think it is basically impossible for Marvel Snap to mess up the way Magic can. Because when Magic makes something like Nadu, right, which is the card that just won the most recent Modern Horizons 3 Pro Tour, it's very strong. they have to live with that forever. Forever. It cannot ever be anything other than that. It is either that card or you ban it and invalidate everything that evolved from it. Marvel Snap cannot make a mistake on that scale. They are simply unable to. The worst Marvel Snap can do is like make a metagame that kind of sucks for a month and a half. That's the worst they can do. And so I do think there's a degree of like people from other card games talk about balance mistakes in Marvel Snap like they're balance mistakes in other card games, and they're not. They just simply are not. It is fundamentally way more acceptable to fuck up balance in Marvel Snap because in the fucking up of balance, you probably learned something, and it's very easy to fix. The number one thing that Marvel Snap has to do to make their things work is just put numbers on them that you can easily change and make the card worse. With Arishem, you can easily change Arishem and make the card worse by making him add 18 cards. Or in a crazy, like if you wanted to get real crazy with it and make him be actually very bad, 24 cards, right? Like you can very easily change the numbers on the card to make it worse. And that means it is a solvable problem at basically any point they decide to solve it, right? So when people talk about like, this is a design mistake, oh my God, this is heinous, this is asinine, this is terrible, it has to be taken in the context of it is impossible for them to do something that actually ruins a metagame the way that other card games can. Just because of the nature of the game, the fact that it is all digital, all of that stuff, it cannot ever mess up the way a game like Magic can. It simply cannot do it. And because of the speed of OTAs, the speed with which they're able to react to this stuff, I would be shocked if major balance issues made it past multiple OTAs. That would be a surprise to me, right? And I feel like that's going to be like a bunch of people in the comments will be like, but Loki did. And it's like, not really. Like that card took a while because it's tricky, but like Loki's a perfect example of why they need to have levers on the card that are easy to change. Because Loki had this issue of being like, okay, this is like Arishem, but we don't have a number on the card that we can easily move up and down. If we get rid of the discount entirely, the card sucks. So if we like make it a 5 cost, the card sucks. And so you end up in these weird spots where Loki is an exact example of the kind of mistake they don't make anymore. Alioth, another example of the kind of mistake they don't make anymore. Those are the kind of cards that can really mess up a metagame for a while because it takes a while to figure out what to actually do. There's not enough levers on them to make it make sense. They took 3 power off of Alioth and he got better. That's obviously an issue, right? There weren't numbers on the card that they could easily change. With Arishem, you can just change the amount of cards he makes extremely easily. It's a very easy solve. Like, I guarantee you there is a number on there that would make the card bad. I promise you there is a number. And so when we talk about messing things up or making things broken, I do think we should probably remember that, like, this is such a living card game that it's very hard for a mistake to stick permanently. And if you want to look for mistakes, you have to look for, like, patterns of design. Like, for example, they keep making good cards. We talked about that earlier. Is that a mistake? I think you could argue it is. I don't think that like they could reasonably do anything else, but I think you could argue that it could be a mistake. What about not buffing old cards to be in line with some of those new cards? Could also definitely argue that's a mistake. The ways in which card acquisition interacts with the actual game, you could argue that's a mistake, right? But I don't think they are physically capable of making balance mistakes to the same magnitude as any other card game, just because of the fact that they change it every 2 weeks. All right, y'all, thank you for listening to the KM Best Yapathon. Thank you so much. As always, I have been KM Best. I hope you have enjoyed this yapping. As always, I just started 2 sentences with as always. What is wrong with me? Thank you so much for making it this far in the video. I have been KM Best. I will see you in the next one.